last week we started talking about the Vimalakirti Sutra, and we didn't actually meet Vimalakirti in that first chapter. The chapter was set in this mango grove where the Buddha was with these thousands and thousands and thousands of individuals, human and non-human, including 32,000 perfected bodhisattvas. And the dialogue in this first chapter was between Shariputra, who was sort of set up as the foil, and a Brahma king who was speaking essentially in place of the Buddha. And there was a message in this first chapter about how we perceive the world, because that determines in large measure how we behave in the world, how we speak and act, how we live our lives. And Shariputra says, when I look at this land, I see it full of knolls and hollows, thorny underbrush, sand and gravel, dirt, rocks, many mountains, filth and defilements. But the Brahma king said, it is just that your mind has highs and lows and does not rest on Buddha wisdom. So in the next chapter, which is entitled Expedient Means, we get to meet Vimalakirti. Expedient means, sort of a code phrase in Mahayana Buddhism, often translated as skillful means. Maitri is the Sanskrit word. Upaya is the Sanskrit word, also the same word in Pali. And it has to do with using appropriate means to accomplish some worthy end. Using fit action to accomplish some worthy purpose. So we meet Vimalakirti. At that time, in the great city of Vaishali, there was a rich man named Vimalakirti. Already in the past, he had offered alms to immeasurable numbers of Buddhas, had deeply planted the roots of goodness, and had grasped the truth of birthlessness. Unhindered in his eloquence, able to disport himself with transcendental powers, he commanded full retention of the teachings and had attained the state of fearlessness. So already we recognize that this is a pretty exceptional individual. It says, desiring to save others, he employed the excellent expedients of residing in Vaishala. So his choosing to where he lived and the type of life he led was described as expedient. Expedient means his immeasurable riches he used to relieve the poor. His faultless observation of the precepts served as a reproach to those who would violate prohibitions. Through his restraint and forbearance, he warned others against rage and anger. His great assiduousness discouraged all thought of sloth and intolerance, Concentrating his single mind in quiet meditation, he suppressed disordered thoughts. Through firm and unwavering wisdom, he overcame all that was not wise. So he was kind of a Dharma superhero, Vimalakirti. And that last paragraph was arranged very purposefully to outline the 6 paramitas, the 6 perfections, of which Vimalakirti had completely mastered. So there's the perfection of dana, or generosity, giving of material goods, giving of teachings of the Dhamma, giving of fearlessness, being safe to be around, dana, generosity, and shila, morality, right speech, right action, right livelihood. Kshanti, patience. Burton Watson uses the word restraint, forbearance. Virya, or energy, vigor. The translator uses assiduousness. Dhyana, meditation, concentrating the mind. And prajna, wisdom, seeing things as they are. The 6 paramitas. A list of virtues. Virtue comes from the root vir, meaning man. So most literally, it means being manly. But these virtues are not gender specific. They apply equally well, regardless of gender, regardless of class, regardless of any social status. The 6 paramitas, virtues. And Vimalakirti was serving as an avatar of these virtues. As I say, a Dharma superhero. But he also had another particular role. And I would call that the role of the boundary breaker, the role of the trickster. Because he was a lay person who demonstrated all of these virtues. He was unafraid of crossing the boundary between monasticism and lay life, moving freely back and forth. And he crossed other boundaries as well. If he visited the gambling parlors, it was solely to bring enlightenment to those there. He would go places that a virtuous person wouldn't be expected to be in order to accomplish his purpose. He frequented the busy crossroads in order to bring benefit to others, entered the government offices and courts of law so as to aid and rescue all that he could. He visited the places of debate in order to guide others to the great teaching. He visited the schools and study halls to further the instruction of the pupils. He entered houses of ill fame to teach the folly of fleshly desire. He entered wine shops in order to encourage those with a will to quit them. So in this way, the rich man, Vimalakirti, employed immeasurable numbers of expedient means in order to bring benefits to others. And then we get into sort of the main plot of this sutra. Using these expedient means, he made it appear that his body had fallen prey to illness. Because of his illness, the king of the country, the great ministers, rich men, lay believers, and Brahmins, as well as the princes and lesser officials, numbering countless thousands, all went to see him and inquire about his illness. So this is kind of an interesting twist. The expedient means he's using here is to feign an illness, essentially using deception in order to draw people to him so he could offer instruction. Kind of like drawing ants to honey, using his illness as the honey. Vimalakirti then used this bodily illness to expound the law to them in broad terms. Good people, this body is impermanent, without durability, without strength, without firmness, a thing that decays in a moment, not to be relied upon. It suffers, is tormented, a meeting place for manifold ills. Good people, he said, no person of enlightened wisdom can depend on a thing like this body. This body is like a cluster of foam, nothing you can grasp or handle. This body is like a bubble that cannot continue for long. This body is like a flame born of longing and desire. This body is like the plantain that has no firmness in its trunk. This body is like a phantom, the product of air and confusion. How many of us are the product of air and confusion? This body is like a dream, compounded of false and empty visions. This body is like a shadow appearing through karma causes. This body is like an echo tied to causes and conditions. This body is like a drifting cloud, changing, vanishing in an instant. It is like lightning, barely lasting from moment to moment. This body is like earth that has no subjective being. This body is like fire devoid of ego. This body is like wind that has no set lifespan. This body is like water devoid of individuality. So he's using his illness to talk about viewing the body, but he gets more pointed. He says, this body is impure, crammed with defilement and evil. Good people, a thing like this is irksome and hateful, and therefore you should seek the Buddha body. So I've always found it interesting that there are these two threads in Buddhist teachings. There is the thread of how rare and wonderful it is to experience a human life. But of course, we can't experience a human life without a human body. But then there's the thread of disparaging the body. In the early Buddhist teachings, there are actually exercises to arouse disgust in the body. Well, I've always found this a little troubling because having spent the better part of my life studying bodies, I find them truly remarkable. The body is just the body. It does what it does. And it is a remarkable thing. It is so energy efficient and functional, requiring so little maintenance, able to heal itself. Remarkable indeed. And not just human bodies, but all living bodies are like this. And even when the healing process goes awry, as with, say, autoimmune disorders, it's still making an effort. It's making an effort, however misguided, to try and heal itself. So the way I come to terms with these contrary notions in the Buddhist teachings is that these exercises to arouse disgust in the body and this language of disparagement toward the body are a skillful means to help us not identify with the body, to not think, this is me, this is mine, this is what I am. They provided a skillful means to help control lust among young celibate monastics, I'm sure. But I don't think we have to necessarily arouse disgust in the body to practice these teachings, or to avoid identification with the physical body. So Vimalakirti is encouraging us, if we must identify with something, identify with what he calls the Buddha body. The Buddha body is born from, he uses the word piti to translate maitri. I would tend to use kindness or friendliness. It's born of kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy. He uses the word indifference to translate upekkha. I would use equanimity, a more common translation. So it's born of kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity, the four Brahma Vihara. It is born of almsgiving, keeping of the precepts, forbearance, gentleness, assiduousness, meditation, emancipation, and samadhi. So in essence, I think Vimalakirti is encouraging us to live by vow and not by karma, not by the particular circumstances of our body, but by our intention, our vow. Good people, if you wish to gain the Buddha body and do away with the ills that afflict all living beings, then you must set your minds on attaining Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. And thus the chapter ends. So what is Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi? This is a recurring theme throughout this sutra. Translated, it means something like unsurpassed, complete, perfect enlightenment. And I believe Burton Watson leaves it untranslated and just uses the Sanskrit because it's essentially incomprehensible. There's no definition for Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. It defies being contained within a definition. So we'll come back to that again and again during the course of this sutra. But I think I'll stop there. We're at the end of that chapter about skillful means, about the body. Do we approve of Vimalakirti's feigned illness and other skillful means that might be employed? How do we think about the body? How do we regard it? So I'll stop there and see if there are any comments. Last time I mentioned that we would try breakout rooms, which hopefully will work better than the sound at the beginning of this talk. We'll give it a try after about 10 minutes or so. And at the end of the breakout, or just like a couple minutes before the end, there'll be a message on the screen that will give us a warning that it's we're going to be coming back to the full group. So we'll see how that goes. And having never tried this before, it'll be an experiment. Thank you so much for listening, and I would welcome any comments.